Follow this story until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to know who's out there listening because honestly, telling this out loud is something I never thought I'd do. Let me take you back to the day everything changed. Not the day I made my decision, that came later. I want to start with the moment I realized something had gone deeply, quietly wrong in my own family, because that's where the real story begins. The devil, as they say, is always in the details. It was the third Sunday of November, 2 days before Thanksgiving. I was 63 years old, standing in my kitchen in Richmond, Virginia, doing what I always did when my son's family was coming over. Cooking. I had a pot of turkey soup going on the stove, 2 pans of cornbread in the oven, and a pecan pie cooling on the counter. I'd been up since 6 in the morning. The house smelled exactly the way it did when my son was a boy. His name is Owen. He's 41 now, my only child. I raised him alone after his father passed when Owen was 14. I worked 2 jobs, receptionist at a dental office during the day, bookkeeping from home at night, and I made sure he never went without. Not once. When he got into Virginia Tech, I cried for an hour in the parking lot of the grocery store because I was so proud. That boy was my whole heart. He met his wife Celeste during his junior year. She was charming when I first knew her. Pretty quick with a laugh, always bringing a bottle of wine when they visited. I liked her. I really did. I thought she was good for him. They got married 6 years after they started dating. By that time, I'd already retired from the dental office and was living off the modest inheritance my mother had left me, plus the investments I'd built slowly over 20 years. I wasn't wealthy by anyone's grand measure, but I had $680,000 in savings, my house paid off, and a reliable budget. I was comfortable. More than comfortable, really. And I was generous with it because Owen was my son, and that felt natural. That first year of their marriage, they asked if I could help with the down payment on a house. They'd found a place in Chesterfield County, 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a backyard. The asking price was $415,000. They had $20,000 saved. I gave them $60,000 saved. I gave them $60,000. I didn't hesitate. Looking back, maybe that was the beginning, not of their ingratitude. I don't think it appeared all at once. It crept in slowly, the way water seeps under a door. You don't notice until the floor is already warped. Over the next 5 years, the requests came in different shapes and sizes. A few thousand here when Owen's freelance work slowed down. A car when Celeste said she needed something reliable for the children, their daughters. My granddaughters, Piper and Roe, were 4 and 6 by then, and I adored them. When Celeste mentioned she wanted to stop working to stay home with the girls, I thought it was admirable. I told her so. I offered to help cover the gap in their income while they adjusted. That adjustment never ended. I covered their grocery shortfalls. I paid Piper's dance tuition and Rose's soccer registration fees. I bought Christmas presents for the whole family, birthdays included. When their HVAC system broke in the middle of a July heat wave, I wrote the check. When Owen said he wanted to start a small landscaping business and needed equipment, I gave him $18,000. When that business didn't take off and he pivoted to doing handyman work on a contract basis, I didn't say a word. I just kept writing the checks. By the time that November came around, I had given them, and I sat down one evening and actually added it all up, every transfer, every check, every cash gift. I had given them $312,000 in 5 years, not counting the down payment. If you count that, it was $372,000. $372,000. I wrote that number on a piece of paper and stared at it for a long time. That Sunday, I had the soup ready, the cornbread sliced, the pie wrapped in foil. I'd set the table nicely. I even put out the cloth napkins I usually saved for holidays. I was looking forward to seeing my granddaughters. I had bought them each a small book I thought they'd love. Piper was obsessed with horses, Roe with anything involving outer space. They arrived 40 minutes late. Celeste walked in first, already on her phone. She said hello without looking up. Owen came in behind her carrying their youngest's backpack, and he kissed me on the cheek, distracted. The girls ran in briefly, said hi, and immediately disappeared into the back bedroom, where I kept some toys for them. Dinner was fine, I suppose, functional. Owen talked about a contract job he was hoping to get in the spring. Celeste talked about a renovation she wanted to do on their master bathroom, new tile, a soaking tub, the works. She mentioned it would probably run about $22,000, and she said it in that particular way she had, not quite asking, but leaving the door open. I didn't respond to that part. I just passed the cornbread. After dinner, Owen helped me clear the table. He was always decent about that. And then they left earlier than usual. Celeste said the girls had school the next day. I stood on the porch and waved until their car turned the corner. Then I went back inside to a quiet house and a pile of dishes. I washed every dish by hand. I do that when I need to think. Thanksgiving itself, 2 days later, I drove to their house. I brought 2 casseroles, a sweet potato pie I'd made from scratch, and the cranberry relish Owen had loved since he was 9 years old. His mother-in-law was there, and 2 of Celeste's sisters. It was loud and chaotic in the way big family gatherings are. I sat at the table and watched my son laugh with his in-laws, and I felt something I couldn't quite name at the time. I felt like a guest, not in the sense of being welcomed warmly, in the sense of being peripheral, present, but not quite seen. I drove home that night thinking I was being sensitive. I was 63 years old and living alone and probably reading too much into things. I gave myself a little talk on the interstate. You raised a good man, he loves you. You're overthinking this. Then December came. I turned 64 on December 9th. I had told Owen the week before, casually, that I was thinking of cooking a small birthday dinner for myself and maybe having them over if they were free. He said that sounded great. Definitely, he'd check with Celeste and get back to me. He never got back to me. On my birthday, I woke up and made myself coffee. I waited for a call. I sent a light text to Owen around noon. Just a little message. Nothing heavy, saying I was thinking of him and wondering if they might stop by. He didn't respond until almost 7 that evening. The text said, "Hey Mom, sorry we got tied up today. We'll celebrate soon." That was it. Celeste didn't text. The girls didn't call, but they were 8 and 10, so I didn't blame them. That falls on the parents. I sat at my kitchen table that night with a glass of wine and the pecan pie I'd baked for myself, and I thought, I bake birthday cakes for every single one of them every year without fail, and my son can't find 5 minutes to call me on mine. I cried a little, then I got angry, then I felt foolish for both. I told myself it was one bad birthday, everyone has them. I moved on. But I noticed, after that, things I'd been letting slide. The way Celeste spoke to me had shifted over the years, from warm to efficient. She contacted me mostly when something was needed. Owen called when he needed to talk through a financial stress or wanted my advice on a contract. My granddaughters, sweet as they were, barely knew me. Because their parents weren't building that bridge, I saw them 6, maybe 7 times a year. January came, then February, then March, and I still hadn't received the birthday celebration Owen had promised. Not that I needed a party, I just noticed the promise and the silence after it. In April, I got a text from Celeste. Not from Owen, from Celeste. She said they'd been doing some thinking, and they felt like they needed some space. That I'd been a little too present lately, and they wanted to focus on their nuclear family for a while. She asked me not to reach out for the time being and said they would contact me when they were ready. I read it 3 times. A little too present. I had seen them 4 times since Christmas, 4 times in 4 months. I had not dropped by unannounced. I had not called excessively. I had sent birthday cards to the girls. I had transferred $3,500 to Owen's account in February when he said a client had stiffed him on a payment. I set my phone face down on the counter. I didn't cry this time. I just stood very still in my kitchen for what felt like a long while, and I thought about that number. $372,000, plus the $3,500 in February, plus the van I'd paid for 2 Christmases ago, plus every birthday, every emergency, every gap I'd quietly filled without being asked twice. And then I thought, they don't actually know where that comfort comes from, do they? They've been breathing it so long, it just seems like air. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call Owen. I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia. Actually, no, let me call her by what she is to me, my lawyer. A woman I'd trusted for 12 years. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked me if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more sure of anything since the day I decided to put Owen through college on my own. We met the following week. I changed my will. I restructured my investment accounts and updated all beneficiary designations. The house, the savings, my mother's jewelry. Everything was redirected, not out of spite, out of clarity. If these people could cut contact with me without a second thought while still having access to my financial support, then I had been operating under a serious misunderstanding about what our relationship actually was. After the meeting with my lawyer, I came home, made a cup of tea, and did one more thing. I sent Owen a text, short and calm. I told him I'd received Celeste's message, that I respected their wish for space, and that I wanted him to know I had made some decisions about my finances and estate planning that he should be aware of at some point. I said I was not angry. I said I loved him. I said the door was open if he wanted to talk. Then I turned my phone on silent and went to bed at 9 o'clock. I slept better than I had in years. I want to be honest about something. The weeks that followed weren't easy. There were mornings I second-guessed myself. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd been too harsh, if the problem was partly me, if I'd enabled this for so long that I had no right to be wounded by it. I thought about what I might have done differently. Whether being more direct years earlier could have changed the trajectory. I think about that still. But here's what I kept coming back to. I had never once asked them for anything in return. Not gratitude, not money, not even acknowledgement. I had just quietly and consistently shown up, financially, emotionally, in every practical way. And somehow that consistency had become invisible to them. I had made myself so reliably available that I stopped being a person in their eyes and became infrastructure. When you stop showing up, infrastructure gets noticed. About 3 weeks after my text, Owen called. I saw his name on my screen and I let it ring through to voicemail. He left a message. His voice was different, tight, confused. He said he'd gotten a letter from my attorney's office regarding changes to the estate. He said he didn't understand what was going on. He asked me to call him back. I waited 2 days, then I called. He picked up on the first ring. He was upset, not unkind, but shaken. He asked me what was happening, and I told him calmly and without drama that I had restructured things because I had needed to take stock of my situation. I told him I'd been thinking for some time about whether the financial support I'd provided over the years had actually served him well, or whether it had made things easier in ways that weren't always good. I told him I loved him and I was not punishing him. I was just making choices for my own life, the same way he and Celeste had chosen to ask for space. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, "Mom, I didn't know about Celeste's text until after she sent it." That stopped me. He said it had caused a fight between them, that he'd been upset with her about it, that he had not agreed with the decision and had told her so. He said he'd been trying to figure out how to address it with me without making things worse. I asked him why, in 3 weeks, he hadn't simply called me. He didn't have a clean answer for that, and he knew it. We talked for almost 2 hours. It wasn't a warm conversation, not at first. There were parts that were uncomfortable and honest and long overdue. I told him how I'd felt on my birthday. He hadn't known the day had passed without a call. He'd thought Celeste had reached out to me. She hadn't. He sat with that in silence for a moment. I told him about the $372,000. I told him I didn't say it to make him feel guilty, but because I thought he deserved to know the actual shape of things, not just what it had felt like from inside the comfort of it. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, "I think I've let things get very out of balance, Mom, and I'm sorry." It was not a perfect apology, but it was real. I've known my son his whole life, and I know when he means something. I told him I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for a different relationship, one where I was a person to him, not a resource, where my birthday was a day he remembered because he loved me, not an afterthought, where I could visit my granddaughters and feel like I was wanted there, not tolerated. He said he wanted that too. We agreed to take things slowly. I didn't rescind the changes to my will that day. I told him those decisions were mine to live with and revisit over time, and I would. What I wasn't willing to do was go back to the way things had been and pretend nothing had happened. Celeste and I haven't spoken since her text. That conversation, when it happens, will be a different one, but I'm not rushing it. What I can tell you is that this past Easter, Owen brought the girls to my house, just the three of them without Celeste, and we spent the afternoon together. Piper helped me make deviled eggs. Ro fell asleep on the couch reading one of the space books I'd gotten her. Owen sat at my kitchen table and drank coffee and talked to me the way he used to when he was young and the world was still simple. At one point, he looked around the kitchen and said, "This house always smells the same." I said, "Your grandmother's pecan pie recipe. I've made it since before you were born." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "I don't want to lose this, Mom." I looked at him for a long moment. My son, 41 years old, and still, underneath everything, the boy I raised. I said, "Then don't." It was as simple and as complicated as that. And as I put the last pan in the oven that afternoon and listened to my granddaughter breathe softly on the couch, I thought, this is what I was protecting. Not the money, not the estate. This. The right to be in a room and feel like I belong there. The right to be someone's mother, not someone's safety net. I earned that, and I wasn't willing to give it up without a fight. I think about that kitchen table a lot. The one where I sat alone on my 64th birthday with a glass of wine and a pie I'd baked for myself, waiting for a call that never came. There's something clarifying about a moment like that. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so quietly, plainly true. Nobody had to say anything cruel. The silence said it all. What I've come to understand, looking back at all of it, is that things rarely fall apart all at once. They erode. A boundary not set here, a need not voiced there, a check written when it would have been kinder to both of us to say no. I was not a victim of bad people. Owen is not a bad person. But I had spent so many years making his life easier that I had quietly made it harder for him to become fully himself. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. The money wasn't just money. It was a way of staying needed. And somewhere along the way, needed had become invisible. When Celeste sent that text, "You've been too present," my first instinct was shame. As if being present, being a mother, being someone who shows up, was the problem. But the more honest I was with myself, the more I recognized that her words, as cold as they landed, were pointing at something real. Not that I had been too present, but that I had been present in the wrong way, always as a provider, rarely as a person with my own needs and limits and voice. I had made myself so frictionless that I ceased to exist as someone they had to reckon with. Changing my will was not an act of revenge. I want to be clear about that. It was an act of integrity. It was me finally making my choices match my values, when for years I had let my fear of losing Owen override my own better judgment. Real love, the kind that actually helps someone grow, requires honesty. It requires a willingness to let people experience the weight of their own decisions. I had been lifting that weight for Owen for so long that his arms had never had to strengthen. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from deciding at 60 something that you are still worth choosing, that your comfort in a room matters, that your birthday is a day worth remembering. I didn't arrive at that wisdom gracefully. I arrived at it sitting alone with a pecan pie in December, and then slowly, over months of difficult clarity, building something sturdier in myself. What I hope for Owen, truly hope, not as punishment but as a mother, is that this has been the beginning of him standing more fully on his own. That the discomfort of those weeks, the missed calls, the hard conversation, the realization that the safety net had real terms, woke something up in him that comfort had put to sleep. He has it in him. I raised him. I know what he's capable of when he isn't being cushioned from consequences. That Easter afternoon, watching Rose sleep on my couch with a space book on her chest, I felt something settle in me. Not resolution exactly, more like foundation. Whatever comes next between Owen and between me and Celeste, will be built on something real. Not on my silence, not on my checkbook, but on the truth of who we actually are to each other. That's the only ground worth standing on.